Thank you for coming to this session of the conference, which is about thriving versus surviving. And I want to thank William from the previous workshop to give us kind of a segue into this program. So I'd like to introduce our well-rounded group of speakers. The first one will be David Griffith. He's the Director of Program and Outreach for the LGBT Elder Initiative at the William Way in Philadelphia. We have Nathan Townsend, who is the Executive Board Member of Thrive SS North Carolina. And we have Andrea Harrington. She is the NHBS Field Coordinator for Philadelphia Department of Health. And she's also an Associate Minister of the Who's Ever Community Church of Philadelphia. So without further ado, here is David Griffith.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon and for including me with the opportunity to speak today. So I'm going to be talking, as Dave said, on this topic of thriving and sharing information specifically about a program that we run that actually David Ganna is a part of. But he got the moderator role today, so I'm the one doing the presentation. But to talk a bit about a program that we run through the Elder Initiative at the William Way Community Center here in Philadelphia, with the hopes that this is something that we think could be easily replicated elsewhere in the country, and with you being a national audience, hopefully can share some things that may be of use to take back to your work in your cities across the country. So again, my name is David Griffith. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Programs and Outreach for the Elder Initiative at the William Way LGBT Community Center here in Philadelphia. Just to talk briefly, a little background on who we are and what we do. So our organization was previously the LGBT Elder Initiative. Was previously a standalone organization that was founded back in 2010 as a community-led initiative by folks who, at the time, were mostly in their 60s and 70s, who came together with a concern of what was the aging services landscape going to look like for LGBTQ people, and a real recognition that there was a lack of services or a lot of barriers to services, and the services that were out there were not inclusive and affirming to LGBTQ older adults. So recognizing that there needed to be both that work within the provider network to improve services and care, and also some education within the LGBTQ community to make sure that people had access to the various services that are out there, and could have help in navigating the aging services network that is very complex, even for people who do have a lot of resources and a lot of supports. So LGBT Elder Initiative has focused in those sort of the organization, has had those two focus areas of doing that community education and that advocacy work. I've been involved with the organization since 2014. I'm a social worker, and so I come to this work with that framework in mind. We, in 2020, affiliated with the William Way Center, our community center here in Philly, who was already doing some work for LGBTQ older adults. And we figured it made sense to bring it all together to be sort of a one-stop shop for LGBTQ older adults seeking services, continuing to do our community education work around social engagement, knowing that there are high instances of isolation in our communities, even before COVID, offering support services, again, and helping people to navigate the systems of the aging network and healthcare, and doing some of the advocacy work. So both promoting greater inclusivity within aging services, then also doing some political advocacy to make sure that the needs and interests of LGBTQ communities are included when we're talking about aging policy. And our HIV and aging work has really, crossed through those four core components of the organization. So we 6 years ago, a little more than 6 years ago now, as the LGBT Elder Initiative, we seeded a HIV and Aging Community Advisory Committee that we lovingly just call our CAC. David Ganna here being a founding member of the CAC. And we're actually very lucky that we've had 4 of those original members still involved in our committee today. And as folks know, anytime you can keep dedicated volunteers on a committee for 6+ years, it's kind of a dream scenario. But this CAC has met monthly for the past 6 years to really oversee all facets of our HIV programming. So planning programs, planning educational forums for the community, planning new program initiatives, engaging in some of our advocacy work. The organization had done some HIV work prior to 2015, but seeing the demographic trends and knowing that the majority of people living with HIV in Philadelphia were over the age of 50, really wanting to make this a core focus of the organization and be able to offer a greater frequency and depth of our programming. And we started out this programming following sort of a conventional community forum model of bringing in doctors and pharmacists, case managers, social workers to present information on different aspects of getting older, of aging with HIV and managing HIV as a chronic illness. And those programs were very successful. But we also started having some conversations within our CAC a couple years ago about sort of what was missing from that program model, and really came on to two areas. One was the need for greater peer support, knowing again that there's a lot of isolation. We know this in research as well as anecdotally. LGBTQ older adults living with HIV, do experience higher rates of isolation. And we're starting to see more and more of this public health understanding of the impacts of isolation. So we want to do more to foster peer support and help people to form stronger support networks. We also wanted to start moving our programming to take a more strengths-based approach, and to really look at a more positive framework for what aging would look like. And this sort of mirrors some of what has been happening in the field of aging at large. Aging has, for a long time, really the field has focused on a more deficits approach to, we're talking about illness and talking about frailty and loss of physical ability, loss of cognitive ability, loss of independence. And while those are really real and important things to talk about and to plan for, there's also a whole other side of what are the opportunities that come with aging? What are some of the positives of how people can give back to their communities, to do things they enjoy? AARP, one of their big taglines now is reframing aging, which really gets to this idea of moving from that deficits-based approach to the more strengths-based and positive framework. And so we took that within our committee and hearing from our members to really say, what does that look like for older adults growing older with HIV, and how can we reframe that to look at the possibilities looking ahead to the future? And so we had a lot of talk about this idea of moving from a framework of surviving to instead talking about thriving. And I do feel like I'm paraphrasing David Ganna a lot here, as you're watching me do this. So I hope I do you justice. But we had a lot of talk in our CAC about what it means to thrive, knowing that thriving is, going to look a little bit different from person to person. There's no one universal way that every person is going to thrive. But we came up within our committee through a lot of discussions over the years of, what were some of the core components of thriving. And that includes physical health, but it also includes social support, social relationships, having peers and friends to count on and to be part of your support networks, feeling a part of communities, all the many communities that we are parts of, having spirituality, having sexuality, still engaging in sex that is enjoyable and satisfying, being able to access services when you do need that support and knowing where to go to to receive these resources. And then the idea of really, again, pursuing passions, looking to the future of what opportunities are out there for what people want to do with their lives to get the most enjoyment out of life. And so we came up with this program that we have called Thrivers, and we launched in 2019. And this in the blue box there is just the little, I guess, sort of mission statement or descriptor that we came up with for the program, but relying on the personal expertise within our communities to help one another get the most out of life and to take advantage of the opportunities before us. And through this programming, I'll talk a little bit more about sort of what it has looked like in practice. But the goal of this was really to move away from just doing the program where we're having experts come in to present, to really look at, how can we be a catalyst for conversations between all of the folks who are sitting in the audience of these programs who have lifetimes of lived experience and knowledge, and know about a lot of resources that, some of the professionals may not know about. So to kind of give the overview of what these programs have looked like. So they are discussion-based programs. We try to make them very interactive. We have held them on a monthly basis. So we got some grant funding at the beginning of 2019 through the support of Philly AIDS Thrift. It's a Philadelphia organization who's done a lot of philanthropic work funding HIV-serving organizations and people living with HIV. So we got a grant from them to pilot this program as a monthly series. But the intent being that these would be discussion-based, sort of a mix of a support group and a educational program. So they are facilitated, and each one has each month has a given topic, but they're sort of loosely facilitated. So, we have the structure in place, but we're really relying on the experiences that people are bringing and inviting them to share with their peers. We include a congregate, this pre-COVID, it looks a little different now, and I'll talk about how we're doing it now, but would include a congregate meal at the end of the program. And we are intentional about doing it at the end of a program, knowing that sort of we wanted people to get comfortable being part of a discussion, getting to know each other a little bit, and then inviting people to stay and stick around and have that informal social time and to bond over a meal. And that was very successful while we were able to continue being in person as a way to sort of help to, again, create the opportunity for people to form these relationships. And our CAC continued to meet each month to identify the topics, and every couple of months would sort of talk with the full group of folks coming to these programs about what else that they would want to see. The first one we ever did was, the topic was just, what does thriving mean to you? And gave everyone sort of a chance to share of what thriving meant to them personally. And we sort of took some of that information to build out some of the topics to happen in the series later on. So to give some examples here, so these are just, I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of the topics that we did during the first, year and a half of Thrivers. And as you'll see, we were intentional in trying to get a mix of things that were maybe more mental health focused, to have some discussion, as well as things that were maybe more, again, focused on finances or focused on housing, some of the very practical day-to-day things. But just to highlight a few and how these have worked. So one actually that David and I facilitated was on finding, which one was it? I lost my list. Budgeting and saving money. So we came up with a huge brainstorm and really just asked folks in the room, where do you go for discounts? What senior discounts do you know? Where do you go to find, what websites are you a part of to get good deals? And we came up with this super long list that we were then able to share it with the group of, what grocery stores have senior discounts at what hours, and what websites give discounted movie tickets at this time. And so it was really just this sort of group brainstorm, group think activity We did something similarly when talking about volunteerism and the benefits of volunteering, and really asked people just to share, where have you gone to volunteer that's been a worthwhile experience? Or if you're looking for this, or what sorts of volunteer opportunities are you looking for? And then hearing from group members to help to sort of connect them with other organizations in Philly that they were involved in already. We got some people connected, I think, through that program who then went on to become buddies, who maybe had buddies before, but through, further talk about volunteering, became buddies. We got through about a little over a full year of programming before the pandemic hit. We took a couple of months off just at the beginning of COVID, and while there was all of this uncertainty, but we did pick it back up in the fall as a virtual program series. And we've gone a little over a year now of doing a virtual monthly Zoom meeting. It has obviously come with challenges, talking about the digital divide, especially with older adults. We have been, I think, pretty successful in including a call-in number. We do have a number of folks who call in by phone, even if they don't have Zoom video conferencing technology. We have some people who even sort of work out going to one another's houses or apartments to be on speakerphone together for the programs. And it's been a really nice way that folks have expressed it being a very nice way of, during the prolonged isolation of the pandemic, having this as sort of a monthly group that really has become part of people's community and people's support networks. It also, we were able to bring in some speakers to Thrivers, even though it wasn't really the initial intent, but it did become a place where we could invite in some doctors and pharmacists to talk about what was going on with COVID and how to stay safe during COVID, to talk about the vaccine. The first time we talked about the vaccine back in December, there was a lot of questions and concerns, and over sort of the progressing months, people would come and report that they got the COVID vaccine that month. And so it was sort of, again, a nice supportive way that people could share their experiences, share their concerns, but also have their questions answered. One other thing that we did continue doing during this time is our Affiliates Thrift, our funder, allowed us to start, instead of serving meals, we would give out grocery store gift cards after the program, knowing that for folks who were experiencing food security, coming to Thrivers was a place to get a reliable meal each month. And we did want to still be able to deliver that for our folks. I'm not going to go through all of this because I don't want to take more time than I'm supposed to. But we did do an evaluation at the end of the first year that just showed we had a graduate student at Jefferson doing a project with us and did an evaluation after the first year of the pilot, and just found that the folks who were attending the Thrivers programming were making changes to their lives, and did report feeling like they were getting a good deal out of the program. And so how it comes to being a replicable program, that it was, we, again, have this very, very dedicated group of volunteers that I know is not always a given, but we've had these loyal volunteers who've been with us for 6 years, taking an active role in planning this. But the cost of the program, it's mostly been food, being able to provide a meal each month. We do provide public transit reimbursements for folks who don't yet qualify for the senior discount for the Philadelphia Public Transit. And then having the space, which, us being at the William Way Center, we were always able to get for free. And we've been able to sustain the program for 3 years through grant funding. And I think it is something that funders want to, that there are funders out there who want to support, whether they are those who typically fund aging issues and maybe newer to funding HIV, or HIV focused philanthropists and foundations who are now focusing more on aging. And I will put out that our HIV and Aging CAC is happy to offer guidance to any groups out there across the country who might be interested in starting this kind of programming. And if you are interested in doing so and getting connected with our HIV and Aging Community Advisory Committee, my contact information is there. And I think that puts me right at about my time. I know we're saving questions for the end, so I look forward to chatting with you more at the end of the session here. And I believe I'm turning over to Nathan.
That was amazing, David. That really, really was. I'm proud of my Philadelphia roots. So many of you know that I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and most of my HIV career has been done in Philadelphia. In 2017, I moved to Atlanta. And I moved there because I saw a statistic from the CDC that said 1 out of 2 Black gay men in Atlanta would become HIV positive in their lifetime. And that was startling to me. And so I felt that the work that I was doing in Philadelphia, although gratifying, was just not enough. So I packed up the car and I moved to Beverly Hills, Atlanta, and joined an organization called Thrive SS, Thrive Support Services, which was an online network for Black gay men living with HIV. Once getting to Atlanta, I realized that there were significant issues around aging. And so we can go to the next slide. And in particular, they said that by 2020, over 50% of individuals living with HIV would be over the age of 50. And I guess they didn't hear me say next slide, would be over the age of 50. And with that being said, with the advancements of medication, we have extended lives. We are living longer, but we weren't necessarily living better. And I guess no one is going to be advancing my slides. So I'll just have to keep on talking until they catch up to me. And so what we did was, there was an opportunity to apply for an HIV and aging positively grant from Gilead Sciences. We were able to put in for that grant. We were awarded $500,000 for a 3-year opportunity to write a curriculum and to develop a program called the Silver Lining Project, which was exclusively for Black and brown gay men living with HIV over 50. With that program, one of the things that we identified with what David mentioned earlier was that people over 50 were isolating. They were not used to socializing in groups. Many of them felt that going to clubs was past who they were. And so they were retreating into oblivion, basically, and weren't, even being adherent with their medication or their doctor visits. And so by implementing this program, we identified several 8 areas. All right, so, okay, we can go to the next slide. So what were the barriers to HIV and AIDS? Stigma, survivor guilt, not prepared for this season, comorbidities, loneliness, depression. One of the things that, I'm 67 years old, and, I was diagnosed 36 years ago, 1984. And one of the things I was told then was that I wouldn't live past 2 years. And so one of the things me, like many other people, did not plan for this season in our life. Next slide. And so not planning for this season, it kind of just snuck up on us with so many obstacles and deterrents to managing our health conditions. We grew important. It was important to stay engaged in the care, but more importantly, how do we stay purposed? How do we stay relevant? How do we stay vital? Next slide, please. And so this young man, he said, there's so much to think about. Getting older has its own set of challenges, and I wasn't prepared for this chapter of my life. I kind of went there, so we can go to the next slide. Oh, that's me. Life can be difficult, especially when we continue while we're living with HIV. This adds even more challenges. And so basically, we had to develop healthy social attitudes and a prescription for life for that situation. And hang on in there. You've got a life that's worth living. So it was instilling the same sense of self-reliance that you alluded to. Next slide, David, as well. Trying to every day is a gift and a new opportunity to share. And so it was trying to find meaning in this maze of dealing with age, dealing with HIV, dealing with being, Black, living with HIV, and gay in the South. Next slide. And so taking all of these things. And this guy said, I never thought I would live to see 60. That was my story. 60 came and I was, celebrating, and now 67. And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Next slide. It's about finding purpose. It's about finding a new way of being. Next slide. It's about finding, a network. We have a community. We have a brotherhood. And one of the things, I never imagined, I've only lived two places in my life, Philadelphia and now Atlanta. And I thought that I would miss my family. I thought that I would miss all of the people, and I do. But I found a surrogate family. I never had a brother. I had 4 sisters, and now have over 80 brothers in this network of people. Next slide. We started out with about 30 members, and we now have about, 83, but our support network, our online support network, we have over 4,000 individuals, and that's in several states. And so as we grow older, we grow bolder. Sometimes a smile is forced to hide our pain. A lot of times we don't show what we're going through. Sometimes it's formed to hide our shame. We preceded stigma. We had so much shame back in the day because HIV and AIDS, which we don't mention anymore, took out so many of our network. So many of the people that I socialized with in Philly are now gone. But sometimes a smile is just a smile, and we embrace that. Next slide, please. And so our program, you can go to the next slide. Our program, what we do is we have a curriculum where they take 4 different modules. One is on loss, one is on PTSD, one is on stigma, and one is just on HIV and aging. They go through that curriculum. Next slide. And then we have a retreat at the end of their training. And the retreat is at a cabin in the mountains. We also have OBA's roundtable. So Oba is an African term meaning, sage, wise one. And so we have reimagined being older, because we're kings and we're royalty. And so next slide. And so we take an annual retreat. And so this is like one of the photos. And so we also have an anti-stigma photo campaign, next slide, where each of these individuals have their own card with their own, or postcard with their own statement on their own slogan about their resilience. Next slide. And so we're in our 3rd year of the grant, and we are stronger together. We are yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We have recovered and are still recovering. We've been through the storms. We've made mistakes. We are far from being perfect. We are fathers, brothers, ancestors. We are on the shoulders you stood on. Think about that. We were the ones that went through the things in life that, now people are reaping the benefits from. We weren't able to be married. We weren't able to, have a lot of the privileges that people have today. And to live in this moment, but also to be able to remember all the moments before where we had to struggle, is kind of a phenomenon. Next slide, please. But there's always a silver lining. And I have actually 2 more minutes. Next slide. I'm like going to the race. I think that was my last slide. That's because I didn't want to run into your time, Andrea. So in my final statements, aging and being at this age with support from brothers, a surrogate family, helping people who, ordinarily have been disjointed from their families, it's been an incredible journey to, pick up my phone. Even through COVID, we had sessions twice a week on COVID. And you don't know how powerful that was to have those Zoom sessions, because we were disconnected from each other. To have found each other and then to be torn away from each other was a horrible thing. But we are thriving more so than surviving because we're stronger together. I'll stop.